Well, things are looking a little bit plasticky because it's that low light time of the day. You guys excited to go for a mystery dinner date somewhere?
Yes.
Okay, let's get to the point of this video. Why you shouldn't use 24 frames a second on a smartphone, particularly the iPhone 11. So the biggest issue is shutter speed. Because of how the auto exposure works on these phones, they're not using aperture to make the light lesser or more hit the sensor. So what it does is the shutter speed controls the exposure because they're fixed apertures in these phones. So let's just start with the one exception to this rule when it's good to shoot in 24 frames per second is now. But this is such a brief window where it's low light and things don't look totally unusable. I was actually surprised in this. We tested this the other day at sunset and still it was better to use 60 frames a second. But don't take my word for it. Have a look for yourself. Tell me which one you prefer. You could show a lot of people the footage and
I don't think they would notice.
well, they probably won't be able to articulate why it doesn't look
just
cinematic.
wouldn't like it as much. Yeah.
But they will subconsciously know, especially if you put something back to back with
Yeah, no, that's true.
proper cinematic motion blur and then iPhone like zombie apocalypse type footage. Like bokeh, that's not really cinematic. Who did Citizen Kane? What's his name?
Orson Welles.
Yeah, that's why you won't see any bokeh in Orson Welles films, because they went out of their way to not have bokeh. So for some reason we think it's cinematic nowadays, but it's not. 24 frames per second is very cinematic, but not when it's Second point.
Motion blur plugins.
I think I've tried 3 in Final Cut Pro and none of them do what they say. It's not really motion blur. It's more shuttery type, choppy type, ghosty type. Well, not ghost, but it's more of what you don't want. They're like duplicate images and you can get them, you can never really get them tight enough where it looks like motion blur. It just looks like more of the same. Looks like that Bruce Lee movie. It's not good. Now you can use filters to lower the light that gets to the sensor and therefore lowering the shutter speed. But the ISO and the shutter speed are connected, and even in the aftermarket apps they're connected. So you might just be raising the ISO if you add filters.
It hasn't been out for long enough for any of the aftermarket products to have figured out what's going on in the software.
Yeah, that's a good point, because which brings us to our third point.
Aftermarket apps.
You can get the Moment one, and we've purchased that, and we've purchased Filmic Pro and the upgrade so you can use the log files. Well, the problem with these apps, yeah, you can control the shutter speed, but 2 big downsides to using these apps is you don't get the HDR video. So your skies will be blown out using these apps, while the stock app, you'll get nice blue skies.
The native camera app.
Yeah, the native camera app, it has better dynamic range than these professional apps. And another thing about those apps too, is if you're using off a tripod, which most people do when it comes to phone cameras, is you lose that electronic image stabilization, which is so good on the iPhone 11s. Like, it's not there.
Yeah.
I think they're scheduling an update to Filmic Pro, but you will need to wait a bit from that, and that's an unknown quantity. To resolve this shutter frame issue, we're going to suggest shooting in 60 frames per second.
Optical flow.
Putting this into a timeline, you might be worried about the skipping frames that sometimes happens when you put 60 frames per second footage into a 24p timeline. A way around this is to use optical flow. It's a good way to stop that skipping frames type thing that happens, but be warned, it does take a bit of time to render.
40% slow-mo.
Another good thing about 60 frames per second and filming in that frame rate is you can drop it to 40% and you'll get that nice kind of medium slow motion. It's not the full 120 frames per second that looks nice and smooth and slow, but it'd be nice for us to experiment with 60 frames per second and slow that down a bit. Have that mid-range speed, because a bit like how it is in photography, you want different shutter speeds in photography. It is good to have different shutter speeds in videography. That about wraps this one up. We were going to do a video on these Saramonic wireless mics and how to integrate that into run and gun style video making, YouTube filmmaking, but it turned out to be an absolute nightmare and it wasn't fun. So respect to those who use wireless lavs, because I don't have the patience for it. Between wind noise and like sticking them on you and the different types of attachments and just it wasn't working for us. We're gonna need to put a little bit more down, like we'll put that one on the back burner for now. And I do.
But we'll get there.
I have worked in sound engineering in my 20s, so it's not due to incompetence, I tell you, but it's just more due to the impracticality of it. When you mess around with things like this, it makes you really appreciate how good our Sony mic. Yeah, we just pop that in the hot shoe and it's pocket, hot shoe,
crisp.
Boom.
The audio is crisp.
Yeah, it's really nice. It's good back and front too. Yeah, so I think we're a bit spoiled. We haven't done enough troubleshooting. Yes, we have. We've troubleshooted. No, I know you have, but I feel like I don't want to give up on it yet. Well, we can use it for this, if nothing else. Thanks for checking out our video and supporting us. We've been enjoying making them. And I hope you have a lovely day. Thanks for all the viewers from around the world. Send the love back to you that we've been receiving with the likes and comments and subscribers. And we hope to see you in the next video. Bye, guys. Bye.